I got 3 hives out there. Oh, thank you very much. I got it. So yeah, I brought them out to the edge of the swamp. There's nothing out there. It's just, it's like the end of civilization, and then it's the swamp and the bay. I brought those girls out there in June a couple of years ago, and I'm like, good luck, girls, go for it. I went in there in October, and the hives were just packed with honey. And I'm like, what did you girls find out here? Yeah, anise, the fennel, all over the place. And guess what the honey tastes like? Licorice. I'm so happy with that because I'm Dutch and I love licorice. So it was like the best honey ever. So if anybody offers you land right alongside the edge of the bay, there's a lot of fennel growing there, wild fennel, and that stuff, it makes very good honey. The bees will find it. Anyway, we're going to talk about catching swarms the passive way, right? What was that? There's some ad campaign. You do life and we do this, something else. Anyway, so a lot of people like to go chase swarms. The Alameda County Beekeepers Association has a very active swarm list. It's worth the $10 just to watch the parade going on. Of people going off. Yeah, it's phenomenal. I used to go and chase swarms and do that a lot, but I don't have the time for it. And so setting up swarm traps allows you to catch swarms and you get to do life. So set up your swarm traps, come back later on in the week, you get surprised. Sometimes you get to see them. Sometimes you don't. Most of the time you're at work and you come home and you're like, hey, I got bees. How fun is that? So we're going to talk about how to set these things up. Let's see if this, no, it doesn't want to work. Does that work? That doesn't work either. All right. Best laid plans of, something happening. There we go. How's that working? Ah, beautiful. Okay. There we go. Okay, so it's all about fishing. Somehow. Oh, can you minimize? Oh, it's going on. It's going off. Now I got the camera. All right. Well, it's all about fishing. So you can do everything right and not catch anything. And you can do everything wrong and be a lucky winner. I have the Alameda County Water District has my phone number and my address. And when they find bees in a meter box, they just lift it out. They get a big giant plastic tub. They put the whole thing in there. It's called a Christie box. You ever been over to Christie Street? That's where they came from. So they take the whole thing out. They put it in this plastic box, and they just put it on my front porch. And so I get about 2 or 3 of them a year. So we talk about all of these ideal things that bees want. And a Christie box is like pretty far down on the list. A cement box sitting on the ground with a teeny little hole, almost no space, and it's wet and cold. And bees move into it all the time, right? So I wouldn't worry about it. I don't think they're seeing my slides. Yep. Okay. It says I'm sharing. There we are. Hey, look at me. Okay. And then if you can minimize that put me into the little guy in the corner. Okay. Fix me. Thank you very much. So anyway, you can't win unless you play. So you got to at least play, put your stuff up, right? And so now's a great time to start putting all your stuff out there and getting ready. So I blame it all on Tom Seeley. So Tom Seeley wrote Honeybee Democracy. Somebody said I should read it. And I read this and I'm like, holy cow, the crazy experiments that he did and all the rest of that stuff. And so it started with that. And then of course, read all the other Tom Seeley stuff. But then I started reading, watching YouTubes and everything else. And I got lucky the first year. And then I just started perfecting it a little bit more and reading everything that I could. So Tom's got a little pamphlet you may find published in 1978 on catching swarms. So a lot of that is very true. I just kind of embellished stuff from there. So why do swarm traps? Basically, it's free bees, right? If you've got spare equipment, you should just get it out there, prepare it, get it ready in the right place, and hope for the best. And hopefully with some of these tips that I give you today, you'll end up a winner. So I started off doing this thing 5 years ago or something. And so I usually catch about 10 swarms plus every year. So I give away a lot of bees, right? Tim is a recipient of them. Elfie, who sometimes comes here, is a recipient. So some of them have made it over. Andy Switke, another member of your club, has been a recipient of bees. So I give bees to a lot of people. If you don't need them, someone in the club surely does, right? So a swarm is always good. And why to get them, right? It's survivor stock. So there's a group over in the Alameda County we call the Local Bee Initiative, and we're trying to foster local bees and use that, right? And so if they made it through the winter, then something's going for them, right? Are they the perfect bees? No, but they're free and they're surviving. So they got two things going for them. We just found a swarm the other day that was in an open comb on a fence in the ivy. It's about 2 feet by 18 inches. Yeah, it's gotten this far, and it just swarmed. So I caught the swarm last weekend. So they're good, right? So some years I doing really good. COVID year was really good. I had a pretty good spring, and I was home because I was unemployed. And so we caught lots of swarms. We caught one on our anniversary. So our anniversary swarm is sitting in the front yard still. So when do they start doing? So if we start looking at most of the bees, they follow the calendar. Doesn't really matter where they are, right? In the middle of February, February 2nd, the old calendar is the first day of spring. Everything starts moving a lot in the world, right? That's when you start tapping your maple trees, but that's also when bees, even dormant bees in North Dakota, start raising brood and start moving on, right? So bees decide to swarm about 3 months ago. And so if they're strong enough, that's what they're looking at. And so in the middle of February, that's when they start building up. Of course, we had some warm weather and we had swarms already in February, and the swarm list has already been lighting up. You catch one already? Oh, you lost one already. Yeah, a friend of ours went into it. She decided she was going to try some new things. She insulated the hive really well. And guess what? She went in there in early February and there was queen cells all over the place. So the time is now. And with this cold weather that we've had, it's like pulling back the slingshot, we're pulling, and every cold day, we're just pulling it back further and further. So as soon as we get a 60-degree day, oh man, right? And that's forecasted for sometime next week. And there's going to be swarms all over the place. That's because they're trying to just biding their time while it's cold and wet, right? So they start raising drones, and then the drones take some time to mature and grow up, and then before they hatch. And so when they finally have drones flying is about the time that they say, or when they have purple eye drones, as they sometimes refer to them, when the eyes of the drones, start turning purple enough that you can see them. That's about the time that the hive says, all right, we got enough resources, we got enough size, we got all of the stuff, we're going to swarm. That's when they make that decision, more or less, right? So that's happened a while ago. And so if your hive is going to swarm, the fuse has already been lit. So there's not much you can do to prevent that. Well, there is. You can try and prevent it, but the long and short is if you got a strong and healthy hive, as Tom Seeley says, 87% of hives that are strong and survive the winter will swarm. That's what they do. People talk about swarmy bees, and I'm like, I don't know if there is such a thing as swarmy bees, but that's okay by me. Right. So if we take a look at the swarm calls, this is from 2017, but lo and behold, this pattern has kind of held true. This is for the months from the Alameda County Beekeepers Association. And we take a look at when it is in like March. starting to go up in April, just cranks, right? And so we start taking a look at that. And we put the equinox on top of that. The equinox is coming up right here. And that's kind of like, that's when that slingshot gets let loose. And so today is the 2nd. That's 3 weeks from now. Are you ready? And somebody says, already. We're all ready already. Right. And so this is the histogram of all of our swarm calls for the past 2, 4, 5 years, taking a look at it. And what you notice is basically the pattern is pretty much the same, right? You know, we get onto the equinox, and that's kind of the start of the season. So between the equinox and the solstice, so the solstice is the middle of summer, that's when you're going to get, 70 to 80% of the swarms. So now is the time to start playing, right? This is from your club, actually. Brian Haynes put this data together once upon a time, long time ago. So the scouts start happening already. So if you've got equipment sitting out, I got all my stuff sitting right outside my back gate, stacked up, and there's bees. So I knew something was up the other day because there's bees all over it. And I'm like, what are you girls looking for? And, and then I found the swarm across the street. So they were hunting. So wherever it is your equipment is, you're going to start seeing, bees hitting on it, and they start scouting on it early. And so do they really intend on moving in? Not necessarily. I think scouts are kind of like 10-year-old boys. They find every fence that is, cut, and every lock that's unlocked, and every fence board that's loose. And they're just wandering around going, hey, what's over here? Check this out. So they're looking at everything, right? And so what you want to do is give them a memorable experience so that when they come back and with intent and they say, hey, where was that place? They can remember where it is, right? So they start scouting now. They're looking around, whether or not they're going to swarm or not. The bees are just looking around, and that's just what the older scouts do, right? So it's the house shopping. They come by, they sniff inside, they sniff outside, they look around, they go inside, they buzz. And so they're listening to the inside of it, trying to determine how big the space is. They actually fly around the outside of it, walk around the outside. So they're checking out the inside, the outside. They're looking at how safe the entrance is. Is it dry? Is it warm? Is it too hot, too cold, whatever, right? So they're assessing just about all of that stuff. So if you can give them the perfect place, they'll remember that, right? So there's a lot of socializing on the front porch, and Swarm Commander sometimes might be a little bit too good because it's got some queen pheromone in it, I think. And so you get a bunch of bees that are hanging out there all day long. And you're like, there's 50 bees hanging around there. And then at nighttime, they all go home. And the next day, they're back there again. You got like, what's the deal here? But yeah, there'll be a whole bunch of them in there. But what you want to watch for is this kind of tsunami effect, right? So if you see some bees in there, and the next day you've got more bees and more bees and more bees. And if you happen to be home on a sunny afternoon, between 10 and 2, and you're watching them, and all of a sudden that beehive that you had a lot of interest in, all of a sudden has none. That's about the time you go inside and pour yourself a tall drink and get yourself a snack, put up a lawn chair and watch. And because they all went back. So all of those scouts that are looking at your place are going to be the leaders of the swarm. So they're going to go lead that swarm. They're going to pick up that swarm. When that swarm leaves, they're going to fly through that swarm, making a bunch of noise saying, follow me. And then they peel off and come around the back, and then they do it again. And so they lead that swarm. So all of the bees that had visited your box are the ones that will lead them to your new box, right? So that's why they all disappear, because they all have to go back and play leader and bring them all back over to your hive. And when they show up, it's just a riot. It's just great fun. They show up and there's just noise. Usually you hear them first. If you're lucky to be home, right? You come in and there's noise and there's flying all over. So since I've got a swarm trap set up on kind of the four corners of the yard, right? Stand in the middle of the yard, like, all right, which box are they choosing today? It takes a little bit because it'll be just a cloud and they're swirling around. And then all of a sudden, well, that one's got more bees on it. And Then you'll end up with this mass on top of it. It's a wonderful sight. I've just watched them in. So if you can ever get to see that, it's call over your neighbors and, stand in front of it and act like God in the middle of it and raise your arms and say hello to them. They won't sting you. They're very docile. There's nothing for them to protect, right? And when they come in, it's just a mass of bees. You just can't believe how many they are, but they're all on the outside because they're doing a lot of fanning and pheromones. And so they're all, kind of telling each other where they are. So they all coalesce on the outside of a box and they'll make a big mass so all of the other bees can find them. And then they'll start filing in. Somewhere in there is the queen. Sometimes you're lucky enough to find her. Sometimes, most of the times not. But they all file in, and after about an hour, they're all inside, and they'll be very quiet that first day. And so that's a great time to move them, right? As soon as they all in, button them up that day if you have to move them. If they're where you want them, leave them. The next couple of days is going to be a lot of activity because they do a lot of orienting flights, and so they're flying around, and so it'll be a lot of flights going on for the first couple of days in there, right? But sometimes it just doesn't look like they're going to fit. This is a Swarm Trooper box. They don't make this box anymore. It was 5 and 5, made out of some corrugated vinyl. It was actually a pretty good box, but they don't make it anymore, right? But feel free to get real close to them because when a swarm comes in, they're just gentle as kittens, tame kittens, right? So these are the three things that there's lots of things on YouTube. You can find it all over the place of ways to set up swarm traps. People will tell you about this and that. And I'm going to build this and I'm going to build that. Well, as long as you follow these three things, you're good. So even if it's in a Christie box on the ground, right? They'll find it. And if it's an appropriate place, they will find a way to move in, right? So scent, accommodation, and location, right? So there's lots of different talk about it, but you can find any way you want to mix up your recipe and see how the heck you make it. So scent, there's lots of different things, but bees have a scent about 10 times that of a dog, right? And dog smells amazing stuff. So that is your flashing neon sign to try and get something in, right? And so that doesn't mean that they're going to move in, but that's going to mean that you're going to catch their interest. So they're going to be flying around and they're going to smell that and they're going to like, woo, what is that? Right. And they're going to come check it out. And that's what you want. You want them to just at least check it out. Whether they decide to move in or not depends on those other things. Right. So the cheap standard is lemongrass oil. And so this is, I got this at Sprouts, Whole Foods, same. $5.95, $8.95, something like that. Less than $10, right, for lemongrass oil. And the gold standard is Swarm Commander. Right. This is now $32 for the bottle. It's gone up a little bit, right? So I have saved you the expense of buying a $32 bottle. And I have made a bunch of cotton balls, which you can take home with you in little 3x3 Ziploc bags. And I hope you don't catch a swarm on the way home. Kind of unlikely, but I made a whole bunch of them. So you can take them home with you later on. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. So the question is, how long do you put lemongrass on? So yeah. So the scents, if you've ever worked in perfume, when I was with Tim, and we did a perfume project, right? They refer to it just like music, right? High notes, medium notes, and low notes, right? So the high notes dissipate much quicker, right? So lemongrass oil is definitely one of the high notes, and so that's going to dissipate quicker. So if you're going to put it repeatedly, just put it on the front porch, right? Because that's what you want them to do is catch that wind. Don't put too much inside the box because now you're going to overwhelm your date. You know what I mean? So, you don't want, you've never done that, have you? Me neither. So every 2 weeks, 3 weeks for lemongrass oil or Swarm Commander on the front porch, just dabble, do you? Don't put too much out there, right? And put a little bit on the inside. If you raise and go through a lot of queens, take your old queens that you have pinched and put them in a little jar of alcohol and save all of your old queens, because that is a queen pheromone, and you can use a little bit of that, and that will do a wonderful job of bringing them in. Propolis, of course, is one of the things that the bees scout after all the time. You put out old boxes and it's a little warm in the sun, and what are the bees doing? They're going to look for the sugar, the honey first, but the next thing you can do, they're going to start stealing the propolis. So if you ever watch bees on an old box and some other stuff, they're chewing on the propolis. They don't care about the wax. They're going to get the propolis. It's amazing. A friend of mine, he made a bunch of little nuke boxes out of plywood, brand new plywood. And I'm like, well, see, I'm going to catch swarms. I'm like, fresh wood is not the great way to do that, but okay. I said, I got some propolis. Okay. So he took propolis and some alcohol and he put it in a blender. I'm not sure where that blender is these days. Or if his wife knows about it, it makes a good shake. But he painted the inside of all those boxes with propolis, and lo and behold, 2 weeks later, he had caught in 2 swarms. Fresh plywood and propolis. So, it had a little bit of wax in there and so forth. And then there's black comb and old comb. So these are the things that the bees are looking for. And that's not necessarily, you don't have to have all of them, but the more you have, the more you get to win, right? Like I said, the Swarm Commander comes in a bunch of different ones. They've got these new and nifty ones. These got a little glass vial inside of a little plastic one with a little dauber on the top of them. So you just crack them and then it spills out, and then you can dab it around and throw the rest of it in the back of the hive. So some lucky winner will go home with that tonight. And then they've got this thing. You use this thing, haven't you, Tim? Yeah. I had one of these things. I've had a couple of them, and I hung them in the back of the hive, and I just, every year I pull it out and I'm like, squirt it with a little bit on there, toss it in the back of it again. These things work good. It's gel. Yeah, it's a squidgy, kind of, and you hang it in the box off of one of the frames, right? But this is just kind of the standard, and they make another gel version of that and stuff. I don't know, but all of them work, and all of them work just fine. So I wouldn't be worried about them, right? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So so if you have too much swarm in there, it will attract them. They will show up, but they'll hang off the bottom for a while until you get them to move in. As soon as they move in, then they'll finally, but yeah, it may take a little while, right? The other way to do it is like I said, is cotton swabs or cotton balls, which I have a bag full of them. You may have smelled it coming in here. Right. Some people say refresh every 6 weeks. It depends on what the weather conditions are and so forth. But in generally, if your hive is well situated, it's every 6 weeks or so, or when you remember, right? Everybody else is catching swarms and you haven't. All right, go check one out, right? So black comb is also, there's always, another thing. So that's always in my kit. Right. So where's my entrance here? So I usually put the black comb a little bit farther away, right? This is a little farther away from the entrance. So some old black comb. So this isn't too ugly. If you go into some of your old hives and you pull it out and your black comb is a little bit mossy, covered with mold, no problem. Just get out your hose, literally, with a sprayer nozzle, right? And just spray it all down, right? And shake it out. Your shoes are going to get wet. And then just store it upside down in the sun, and it'll dry out and it'll look beautiful and it'll smell really good. And it rejuvenates it pretty quickly. Boy, that smells good, right? So always give them some black comb out in the back of that, right? So that they can get that good, deep scent. Anywhere that bees have been is where bees will be again. And that's something that they definitely will do. A lot of people say, my dead out never, or some people say, I've had bees in this box for 7 years. And that's about the time you say, did you? The bees died out right about January and they didn't pay attention. And lo and behold, around February or March, then the swarm moved right back in. So, when you talk to the people who have had bees inside of the side of their shed or something else like that, that's often what happens, is that the bees have died out and there's a prime hive in there that smells really good. The other bees know about it, and lo and behold, they'll just move in, and the homeowner never knew that they ever left. So yellow comb, if you've got some yellow comb, it doesn't have to be pretty. Here's some, partial stuff. The idea is that you want to get something that the queen can start laying in as soon as possible. So if you got a partial, just a little bit of one of yellow comb, right, that's a great thing to put in there so that the queen can start laying as soon as possible. So the sooner that she starts laying, the better chances are that that hive is going to stay there and not run away on you. So it does happen. People say, hey, I got a swarm. They moved in. 2 days later, they left. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. But that's sometimes what happens. Yes. Yeah. So this is Reflectix. So yes. Yeah. So it's double wall. You can buy it at the Home Depot, but this is the stuff that you get my groceries delivered in. And so I just cut it to size. Pandemic. Everybody discovered, you can mail order groceries and they come in these bags. But yeah, you can buy it at Home Depot, Reflectix in a roll that's 16 inches wide. So yeah, I use it as the inner cover for basically everything now, because it reflects the heat. It seals it up really nicely, keeps everything nice and dry. Even if you've got a wonky migratory lid on top of it, it keeps the water out. What's that? Nope, this is my inner cover. So the nice thing about it as an inner cover is when you put this on, they will propolize this pretty quickly, and they're going to glue it on, which is no problem, because when you go into the hive, you can say, hello, anybody there? Right? You're not cracking the whole lid and popping the whole thing off at the same time. You get to peel it back. So, a lot of Europeans have been, using fabric inner covers for a long time. So that works too. But these work really nicely. It will not have enough space. That is correct. So you need to put on an eek, as they say in Britain, or basically a shim. We call a shim. Britons call it an eek. Yeah. Yes. That is correct. That's correct. No bee space there. That's right. The bees do not go over there. But if you have this in a normal box, what you'll find is that they'll start putting wax up there and they'll start pushing it up. They'll make their own if they really want it. It might be, yeah. But anyway, that's what I've been using a lot. So anyway, yellow comb, right? So even if, this is something that I spun out last year, this is great to use in here, right? So if you spun it out and it's nice yellow comb, this happens to be mostly, this is half drone and half brood, but still, as soon as, give them a nice yellow comb for the queen to lay in, the sooner she can start laying in here, the sooner they're saying, okay, that's home. And then as soon as they start pulling in pollen and so forth, then you probably have eggs in there. Then it's really easy to just button that hive up and move it wherever you want, right? So, oh yes, yeah, we're going to get right to that, right? So we're still on scent, but you're ahead of me, right? So slum gum. So when you got all of that stuff that you harvest off of the hive and you melt off all your wax. So that slum gum is all that stuff that's not wax. You melt off your wax. So this is my wax melter. And so I put pieces of burlap in there, these old coffee bags. and it melts through. And then so all of these pieces, I forgot to bring one tonight, but they're just pieces of burlap, and they have all of that slum gum and wax and everything else. And I just lay that across the top of here. So it's got a lot of scent to it. So if you have slum gum, so what some people do is they just heat it up and they just make what's called a slum gum burger. Slum gum is all the leftover stuff from wax when you melt out the wax. So on dark comb, right? If you ever tried melting this out, there's almost no wax left. So this is all of the cocoons and leftover stuff. And so slum gum is just that old black, nasty stuff. It is almost like tar. And it will turn to tar if you leave it for a while. Maybe. Maybe not. If she has a choice, she will not, right? And so often what I have found is when I go into this, that's why I usually take this dark one and I put it against the wall. And it acts somewhat as insulation also and quieting the air. And so she will usually find the one that's got the yellow comb in there, and she'll lay in here. So a week later, I'll go in there and I'll find out that, you know, she's on here and we've got eggs and they're storing stuff, and there ain't nobody on here at all, right? It was just sent, and I can pull it off, and now that it had bees on it, it smells even more like bees, and it goes into the next swarm trap, right? Just keep on recycling that puppy all around. There's something called a Russian scion, and I don't know why it ever got that name. Maybe some Russian down the street figured it out. Scion is usually the, you know, the twig comes off a plant. I don't know why it got this name, who knows? But anyway, it's just an old mat. Some people use the inner covers, like I said, fabric inner covers. And you just take that and hang that up. And so if you've got a busy bee yard, or your neighbor has a very busy bee yard, this is just a frame that's got the slot top and bottom, and he put this mat in there, and he put a little cover on it to keep it dry, and you hang it up and outside, and you can see a little string hanging on there, and you put it on a pulley. So when the bees swarm, this is the first likely place for them to go. And so if you have a neighbor's bee yard that is unattended, set one of these things up and you might be lucky to catch their swarm. Then it takes it very easy to just dump this into your box and Bob's your uncle. Hey, he wasn't taking care of him, so I took care of him. All right. So what's that? I have not, because I don't have a bee yard with enough hives in it. My yards are usually have only 2 or 3 hives in it, but. And then none came to it, huh? Like I said, it's all fishing. I cannot guarantee your results, but okay. So the next thing is accommodation. Is what, you know, how are we going to set up this hive and give them some place to go, right? And so you need some, like I said, some comb for her to lay in as soon as possible, right? We need enough open space. So thank you very much for your prompt. So open space, we want to have some open space inside of this hive so that they know, you know, that they when they come in and they buzz around, it sounds like an open hive, right? And so, you know, we've got our dark comb, we've got some yellow comb. I got some more in here. Sometimes I throw something with a wax, a plastic foundation against the wall to kind of deaden it over here. Here's one, right? You can barely see, it's just starting. Some nice yellow comb just started on that thing, right? And so this is a very likely frame for her to start laying on, right? And then I start getting it. Oh, there's another black comb. Try not to put 2 or 3 black combs together, because then you have made a wax moth trap instead of a swarm trap. They will show up. But then we start talking about opening up and having some open space. So half of my frames give them something to come into. The other half, usually, I'm giving them open frames for them to come and lay in. I'm to draw comb. So there's lots of ways to do it. So every once in a while, when I give away bees, I say, you can take my box. And all I ask in return is you bring back a box with 10 frames in it. And I get some frames, and I just took a saw and I cut the center out. Can you see this? Can you see that kind of the pattern in there, right? They have no problem filling this out directly. Somebody got one of these and said, why is the center different? And I'm like, oh, you got one of those. Yeah, it's a plastic. It's just all plastic. And yeah, you just get out a little hand saw and just saw it, a drywall saw will do just fine. Or if you get the circular saw, be very careful because you'll cut right through it. But that's one thing to do with some of your old janky frames that you're not doing anything with. Cut a big hole in them, stick them in there, right? Smells really good, right? This is the one that I do a lot of these days. I pass this around is you get some wax foundation. And that I bought a whole box for medium frames, and then I glue them in with melted wax. There's a really cool little tool, and I don't know the official name. If you ever do batik dyeing, it's kind of the same thing. It's a tube with a finger hole in it, and you dip it in the hot wax and you lift it up, and it draws a nice little perfect bead of melted wax. So that one works really good. So if you're making cut comb or whatever else, that usually works pretty good. Oh, another one of those, right? A little janky, that's okay. Really janky, that's okay, right? And then you just got one that you just got old stuff, right? Just rip the old centers out and leave whatever's left. They're going to use the top as a starter strip straight away, right? But what's important is you always give them a starter strip. They have to have the clue, because if you leave them all open, right? Some people just put in 2 or 3 frames, and you'll see some YouTube videos. I just put 2 frames in there, and you're like, don't do that. Because what they're going to do invariably is they're going to build on the other side on your roof, right? So if you have a 10 frame box, put 10 frames in it, right? And open it up and make sure that there's some open space inside of there, right? So this is another way that I do it, right? I just take some wax foundation. I mean, some plastic foundation. I double wax everything, right? Get out the little roller and wax them up. But you just scour this with a utility knife blade, and it breaks nice and handily right down there. So plastic foundation with plenty of wax on it. Short frames. So if you got some medium frames, or if somebody gave you some of those really weird, really short frames, just go ahead and use them on the other side, right? So once again, you're giving them some open space, right? And right, this has got some yellow comb. Maybe she'll move in on this. Who knows? Oh yeah, so I use the short frames, it's kind of my on the side where I want some open space. So I put the open space by the entrance. So a little bit more open space. This the other way to do it, right? Is if you're handy with a woodworker, right? Just cut yourself a little strip in there. Paint stirrers do it, although also the big fat popsicle sticks, tongue depressors. If you know somebody, well, there's lots of ways to make a starter strip. But long and short is fill your box up and make sure you give them a starter strip that they know what to do with. If it's just bare wood, go ahead and rub some wax on it or something, right? And avoid the temptation of just putting it in the middle, because invariably what they always will do, if you ever do cutouts, they're never straight, right? They're straight for a little while and then they curve, right? They're not straight for 16 inches or 20 inches, right? So if you're putting starter strips, go wall to wall, all the way, right? Yes. Right. So here my entrance is over here, right? So farthest away from the entrance is where I want them to land, right? This is where I want her to come to. So when she comes in here, right, it's quiet. The air is quieter over here. And so when they coalesce and so forth, it's going to be warmer over here. It's always warmer farther away from the door, right? So if they have enough oomph to start building over on this side, then they're not worried about warmth anymore. But the first day that they move in, they are worried about warmth. She's not going to start laying until it's good 96.8 degrees in there, right? And so once it gets nice and warm in there, then she feels comfortable. They can't draw wax unless it's nice and warm, right? So I put the quiet end over here where I think that they're going to be, right? So that's where my dark comb goes first against the wall as insulation. And then I get some yellow comb and some other things over here on the far side. So I'm hoping that she's going to move in over here and give the open space over here. Yeah, by the entrance. So when they come in and they buzz around and they want to hear that noise, that echo of that box. And so they want to hear that open space. And so that's why we've got something that you can almost see through, right? Almost. But at least they can see through it, right? And they got that open space right off the bat. So Tom Seeley did a whole bunch of experiments. Well, okay, Tom Seeley didn't do a whole, well, I mean, for this one, he did a very simple one. He did 10, 30, and 100 liters. And he said, oh, 30 liters works pretty good, or 40 liters for the boxes on some of his experiments of what swarms moved into. So right. Yeah, he did it on an island where nothing else was out there. Oh, really? That may be true. Yeah. So so that's something else. So as we're talking about urban bees, right? What do we usually keep? We're keeping usually 2 boxes of bees, right? By the time that they swarm, right? In nature, Tom Seeley says that we're usually seeing about a 40-liter hive. That is 1 10 frame deep. So that's about as big as natural hives seem to get. But because of the way we keep bees, we end up with a whole bunch more. Half of the colony leaves. That's, that's good 6, 8 frames of bees, right? 6, 8 frames of bees is not going to fit in a nuke box. They're going to try. And I got a slide to show that in a little bit. So bigger boxes will get you bigger swarms. But nuke boxes work too, but just be aware, the secondary and third swarms will be, will be smaller and they will fill it in. Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. They'll yeah. And they'll be out there for 3 days. And after about the second day, you're like, okay, girls, you ain't going to make it. And you're intent on being here. Let's give you a bigger box. All right. But 10 frame box is kind of the standard. So there's lots of ways to do it. Just go with a standard 10 frame box. I staple on the floor. Anybody remember hive staples? They work great still. Or this is a medium box with a little bit of spacer on the bottom of it, just to kind of give us that same space in there. The other one is like I said, is the Swarm Trooper. They don't make that thing anymore, but that was 10 frames also in there, right? So once again, dark frames farther away from the door, open frames closer to the door, right? So we're trying to keep it nice and quiet over there. Put your swarm lure back over here in the dark side. So if you're putting a swarm lure inside of it and on the front porch, right? Oh, we already talked about that. So yeah, the nuke boxes, this is what one looks like, right? It's just like that, right? 2 inches deep for 2 days. And then you finally say, okay. So this one, you barely see, there's another box right next to it, and the swarm had moved into that one. So just because you have caught one, that doesn't mean that's the end of things, because there may be 2 swarms, there may be 2 mules kicking in your stall. So you want to be prepared and set up, 2 swarm traps, sometimes right next to each other. I had a bunch of stuff sitting by the back gate once again, and the swarm was coming in, and I'm like, okay, which one they're going to go for? I had some boxes stacked up that was going to be moved out, the next day to go out, put in the truck and go to another yard. And then I had a swarm trap set up, and they all came in and they're all over. And I'm like, okay, let's figure out where you're going to go. And they landed on 2 different boxes. And I'm like, well, they'll figure out wherever the queen is. 2 days later, they're still in 2 boxes. 2 weeks later, I open them up. There was 2 viable colonies. They came at the same time. So sometimes, when they have a secondary swarm and they've hatched a bunch of queens, you'll get 2 queens. So it's not uncommon to find more than 1 queen inside of a swarm. So if it's a good sized swarm, right, some people have done that, right? And they go through and they find 1 queen and then they find another queen, and then you can split them up right there if you are so fortunate to be able to find those queens inside of your swarm. So if you have a bunch of hives, 3 or 4 hives, one of them swarming will kind of induce the other ones to swarm. It's just a mad riot, like a blue light special. Everybody's running for it. And so nobody remembers blue light special, huh? Kmart. Thank you very much. Okay. Huh? Oh, it was at Kmart. Kmart would put on a blue light special and they would put something at half price and people go running over to buy stuff. It was total silliness. It was 40 years ago or more. Anyway, yeah, small boxes, small swarms, bigger boxes, bigger swarms. Trying to make sure it's dry inside as much as possible. And that's one of the reasons that I use Reflectix a lot, right? Because Reflectix does a wonderful job of sealing up even the most janky of boxes. I use my old boxes. This thing's all rotted and coming apart in the side and in the corner. This stuff just does a great job of doing that, right? So I use this on all my hives, but it's especially in the swarm traps to try and give them a little bit more heat when they're in there, but also keep them against that Goldilocks temperature. So if you have this box out in the sun, you don't want it too hot. If they come in there and it's 100 degrees inside of that box, they're like, this is too hot, right? Because they'll do a fine job of air conditioning, but if they have to come in and air condition it straight away, that's a tough task for a swarm. They just don't have the resources, right? And so that's why I always insulate the top of these hives, right? A defendable entrance, you keep it to a fairly small entrance. You want to make sure they can still get in. So, it's not a 1 or 2 bee thing, but 2 inches is kind of the recommended in there. Sometimes I put the little, have some of those discs. If you buy those entrance discs, those things are, I don't know, they're like $1 if you buy 10. They work great if you're going to make a dedicated swarm trap, or as you can see, I spent a lot of money on this one here. Cut out an old piece of plywood and just tap it onto the side of it, right? So you want it dark and airtight. So if you have old boxes that have screen bottom boards, just put another piece of Reflectix in there, or, an old campaign sign, that Coroplast. Yeah, put it on top of it. Yeah. And just cut it to size and put it inside of it. That'll slow down the air enough that you can use your old screen bottom boards. Yes. Whatever you like. So, and both, yes. So the ideal, set a swarm trap up on your hive stand with your nice box that you intend to use. And if they move in, Bob's your uncle, you're done. Hi, girls, come on in. Then all you have to do is go in there the next week and rearrange a couple of frames, making sure they're in the center and that they keep on drawing comb. And you're there. You don't have to move them at all. So put them on a, go to Tom Seeley and he'll talk about 15 feet to 30 feet and all the rest of it. And you'll see the internet. They'll have a bunch of guys talking about hanging them from trees and ladders and deer stands. And yeah, you don't need to do that. Just put the hive box where you intend to have the bees is one way. Otherwise, you put them wherever you can. So I hit up all my neighbors. And so I've got some stands that I just made out of, took a couple of 2 full-length 2x4s, cut them in half, and got one of those little mini pallets, attached the legs onto that. So now I've got a stand about this tall. Put them in the corner of my neighbor's yard. What's 2 2x4s? Oh, they used to be 88 cents. Now they're $1.88. Anyway, $5 and you got yourself a 4-foot hive stand. Put it in the corner of somebody's yard. My neighbor had a second story deck. She never went out there. I set them on the picnic table on a second-story deck. It was a great spot. Picked one up or two every year, right? It was just a good place to do that. He says yes. Survey says go for it. Put a swarm trap right next to an existing hive. They'll be checking it out. They love company, it seems. If that's where you want them, set them up there. I put them all over the yard. So, right, like I said, by my back gate, I've got, all my boxes there. And so I set one or two up there, and they usually hit the second one on the top, not always the top one. I've got a little shed, just one of those steel sheds off on the corner, right? And they hit that one up all the time, right? So we're already talking about location, right? That 6 foot aluminum shed catches one or two every year. It's underneath a big valley oak. And so it's a landmark. It's something that the bees can figure out and they can see. And so you want to give them a landmark, right? So first of all, you have to have bees, right? So if there's no bees in your neighborhood, kind of unlikely, but somehow in my neighborhood, I've got a whole bunch of bees and they just show up. We don't know whose shed they're living in or where, but if I'm catching 10 swarms in my yard, they're around, right? Some people never catch one, there might not be bees in their yard or so forth. Right. If you really want to get serious, you can do the bee lining, right? If you have a garden, you can catch the bees and you can go do what's called bee lining. You have a little box and you catch the bee and you put it in the box and you walk 10 feet away where you think they went and you let them out and you see which way they go. And then you do that again and again and again until you find out where the hive is. I have not. My friend took a Boy Scout troop and consumed their weekend. And they found one. Yeah, they found a tree, right? But it's a great way to keep 10 Boy Scouts busy for a weekend and running around out in the hillside, catching bees, chasing them down. And if you want to find out anise, wherever you buy your lemongrass, buy some anise. Anise will show them up rather quickly. Anise oil. It works pretty good, right? It will show you if bees are in your neighborhood. So you just dab that out in the backyard somewhere, and if bees will start showing up, then you know that there are bees. If you put some anise out and nothing ever shows up for the afternoon, probably want to go fishing in another hole. Yeah, you can use that for bee lining. So that's yeah. Yeah. So marking bees has been happening for a long time. Yeah. A friend of mine, he marks all of his queens, and he got past just putting a yellow dot or red dot on the back of them. He started putting letters. He's going to work on his Chinese characters, but don't think he's going to quite get to that level. But anyway, so look at the history of swarms. So if you know of where swarms happened in the past, that's always a good thing. If you know of where a bee tree is, then by all means set up a swarm trap near a bee tree, because a bee tree is only going to be 30, 40 liters. It's going to swarm if it made it through the winter, right? Good odds of it. If you've got, something out there that where bees are. My friend had a shed. It had a huge colony underneath it. And they came out every year and swarmed into his tree. And so he just started setting it up there, and they finally died out, and then they moved into the neighbor's shed. So he would get 2 or 3 every year, very repeatable. So sometimes they're there, and then sometimes they die out, and then your fishing hole goes dry. Yeah. Yeah, the 2 feet or the 2 mile thing. So when you catch a swarm, so the night that you catch them, you can close them up and move them wherever you want to. because they have no idea. They've been disoriented. They know that they're in a new home. So I caught one across the street from my house the other day. Fortunately, it was going to be a cold night. They all moved in. I closed them up. I put them in my backyard, 60 feet away. And then the next day it rained and it was cold. So they kind of kept them in. But after that, they did the orienting flights in the backyard and so forth. And none of them have showed up back. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So if you move them straight away, then they have no orientation and they will adopt wherever they are. And you can move them wherever you want to. If you leave them for a week, they will have oriented. So if they've been there for a week, then you will have to do the 2 feet or 2 mile kind of thing. I'll bring them over to Tim's house for an afternoon. He just volunteered. Oh, they do. Yeah. If there's another hive nearby. Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah. So if you're catching a swarm and it's just in a box, they and there's no other frames for them to hang on, they can overheat very quickly. So if it's not a super cool day, and it's going to get warm, you will open up the box in 3 hours and you'll find a lot of dead bees. So if you're catching a swarm, going chasing swarms, I would chase swarms with comb, with frames. Yeah, I would. Yeah, they do, but they got the cleats in between, and it keeps the bee space, and so they may bump it back and forth, but they'll hang on. Yeah, yeah. Or you get some more reflectix and you stick it in the side to kind of, shove it all to one side. Yep. Yeah. Yes. Right. If you're going to get a cardboard box, the cardboard box, the coolest cardboard box in the world is Crown Royal or Chivas Regal with because frames fit in them. Yeah. So if you're over at the Wine and More or so forth, the purple and the box, it's a sturdy box because it holds, a whole bunch of glass bottles, but it'll hold frames. And so a lot of people have just screwed a cleat onto the side and used that. As a matter of fact, I didn't include that, unfortunately. One of the people took that to heart. She made a beautiful swarm trap and she had it out, and the bees moved in and she got a little busy. 3 years later, they're still living in that Chivas Regal box. It's a cardboard box from Trader Joe's, right? And they're living in there just fine. I can't prove that. Right. So stable and still, they don't like vibration and so forth, wherever you set that up. Some people put them on pulleys. Yeah, you can do all that stuff. They don't care, right? So the frames, older and better, black comb, partially built out, all that stuff. If you have new frames, I just take the torch to them, burn a little char onto them. They love the smell of burnt wood, much better than like fresh wood. Because they're used to going in burned out trees, right? So they have no problem with old stuff, right? So the open frames, like I said, cutting one out, or just cutting out some old janky stuff and gluing it into the top, wiring them in. There's lots of ways of doing that. So basic premise, once again, is 10 frame box is what I use all the time. If you have 8 frame equipment, that works fine too. But some people build all this special boxes. Just use your old boxes, or if somebody on the club is getting rid of some old boxes, little duct tape, fine, Reflectix on the top, it'll seal up just fine. The old stuff. A feeder, I do use a feeder every once in a while. Right, so you get one of these in-frame feeders. These work really good, especially with Reflectix. You can just peel back the corner, fill it up, peel it back. So even on a cold morning like today, I can go in there and I can fill that feeder back up, right? So if you have feeders, go ahead and put it in your box, right? Be prepared. I put it on usually on the farther side away, or whichever side you want, doesn't really matter in there, right? So if you have, once again, put in full combination of frames, right? If you've got an 8 frame box, put 8 frames. You get 10 frame box, put 10 frames in there. Level left to right. Because if they start building comb, and they will, they build comb at a crazy rate, an unbelievable rate. So I forgot to bring Wally Shaw talked to your club a couple of years ago, the guy from Scotland, Wales. Anyway, in his book, he commented that, he noticed how fast swarms will build comb. And so he purposely fed them to the max. He just kept them fed. He said he got 21 frames in 2 weeks of drawn comb, right? That probably was a big size, probably a good size swarm for him to do that, right? Because you need a lot of bees to be able to draw that much. But, that's kind of on the outside of life to be able to draw that many comb. But we've got a good reason for that. Huh? 21 frames. Well, he just kept on adding. Yeah, he just kept on adding. He just kept on opening up and putting in, foundationless in the middle, and just kept on going. Yeah, just keep on getting them to build it, right? Right. So when I first got into this, I had a problem with bee math, and I'm like, okay, what the heck happens here, right? So this is the normal cast of bees, huh? Oh, you wanted to take a look at that one first? Okay. All right, you good? So this is the normal cast of bees, right? So 21 days they're in the brood, 21 days they're hive bees. They're hanging out inside of the house, taking care of things. And then for about 21 days, they live their life outside, right? So traditional knowledge, right? When I first got into this, I said, well, what bees swarm? And everybody goes, oh, the bees that fly. So it's all that 1/3 out there, or maybe some of the other ones. Well, what we found out, right, in asking some of these guys, is that the median age, is back. Thank you very much. Is 10 days. That's the median age of a swarm, right? So that 10 days from hatching. That's the median age, which means some of them are younger than that, right? So when the bees are house bees, you kind of expect them to hang out, but they still have to go out on cleansing flights. So they do go out for flights. They know how to fly just fine. They may not fly very far, but they only have to fly as far as the queen does. And the queen can't fly very far either. right? So all they have to do is match the queen. So, it's like, oh, and where is the wax producing? That's at 15 days, right? So they've got 13. So 13 to 17 days or something is the wax producers. So when they're about, that 15 to 2 weeks to 3 weeks old, that's when they produce the most amount of wax. So you've got a whole bunch of wax producers in there in your colony when they swarm. Well, the other thing we know about the casts is that they're a little bit flexible, right? Bees will advance or move back as the requirements for the hive dictate. So if you give them a bunch of feed, they don't have any reason to go out to forage, but they do have a need for a lot of wax. They need, accommodation. They need furniture. And so they're going to stay home and build furniture. So you can take advantage of that and keep them there in that mode. As soon as you break that cycle, you can kind of hard to get them back to that, but take advantage of it. So if you feed the daylights out of a colony when you first get them, they will draw a lot of wax for you very, very quickly. But by the same token, make sure that the swarm trap you set up is ready for them to draw a lot of wax really quickly, because they come loaded for bear and they will build. And if you don't have nice strutter strips, they're going to build wonky comb, and then you're going to be cleaning up a mess very, very quickly. Right. Oh, okay. Okay. No problem. So the other thing to do is add a frame of capped brood. That'll help boost it, right? That'll put all your casts back into place. So if you give them a frame of capped brood from another hive, all of a sudden that hive will be booming really, really quick. Yeah. Right. So that frame of brood, capped brood, will move up rather quickly. Right. So after the move in, feed them really quick and build them up. This is Tim's thing, finding that swarm sitting on the bottom. They do it every once in a while. I don't know what to do. Take a frame, lift them off, put them inside. Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you like the Texas bee girl there, right. So set up 2 swarm traps next to each other, because you never know which one they're going to go into. The swarm list last year for Alameda County had over 700 calls for the season. So that's a lot of them, right? I don't recommend climbing ladders. Public spaces are a little bit iffy. Your equipment may get stolen, but and don't leave them too long before you move them. I caught one on my friend's balcony, and she was on vacation, and then her friends who wanted the hive was on vacation. 6 weeks later, we finally moved them, and it took 2 people to carry them down a very narrow staircase. There's a lot of bees and a lot of stuff. And those fiber flower pots that you see, not a good idea, right? If you ever, they look like a 15-gallon fiber flower pot. If you ever see them in the swarm traps, you'll find them in the Man Lake catalog. Still, people still sell bad stuff, right? So anyway, wrapping up, it's just fishing, right? You can do everything right and not catch anything. You can do everything wrong and catch them, right? This is my friend's plastic dinosaur. That was a blow molded dinosaur that the bees moved in, and they lived in there for 5 years. They flew right out of his mouth. It was fantastic. It came on the swarm list. Somebody called him up and they said, just take the thing. He's like, okay. Right. In the bottom corner, is the water meter. They'll show up all over the place. So you can do everything right and not end up a winner. You can do everything wrong, and you never know, right? So it's your responsible as a beekeeper. Use your powers for good, and set out all your equipment as you can, and take care of that. I have some cotton balls in little baggies, if you want them, that are scented with lemongrass oil and Swarm Commander. So if you want to take some, I got about 30 of them. And so I think we can have enough one for everybody, and can smell good on your way home if you can tolerate the smell of lemongrass. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. As always, great to hear about how to acquire freebies at this time of year. And if anybody has last couple of questions for Phil, we do have a couple of minutes, but we do need to be out of here at 8:30 on the dot because the library are pretty picky about that. So thanks for everybody who came here and thank you, Phil. Oh yeah, raffle. Yep. Do you want to head that up? You've got the tickets? Okay. Alrighty. Come on down. Okay, which did you? Oh, those are your tickets. Okay, alrighty. Raffle, Phil, how many raffle items do we have?